Hello, everyone. What's going on? This is the Noah Gillian Show, and I, of course, am your host, Noah Gillian. So happy you decided to join in today. Joining me on the show today is longtime contributor and prospect aficionado, Connor Laverty. What's going on, Con?
What's up? What's up? Back again. Long time no see.
Yeah, of
Different
course.
sport, though. Different
Yeah,
sport.
been a crazy week on the pod. We started with football, went to basketball, now we're back to baseball.
Yep.
Wrapping it up on the 15th of March, 2022, when we're recording this. And on today's episode, Con, we're going to begin our MLB preview series. This is the third year we've been doing this, which is absolutely crazy. And this season we're going to be expanding it a little bit more. Last couple years we've only done 2 episodes, specifically National League and American League. This year we're going to be doing a total of 8 episodes, which is just going to be absolutely nuts. It's going to allow us to go in more depth and really talk about it a lot more, which I think we're both excited about. And then as our expanding panel grows, as we talk about more and more divisions and teams. So today we're going to talk about prospects. We're going to talk about the minor leagues around the league, and talk about who's standing to benefit from their own systems. So we're really excited to get into that. Before we get into the show, though, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment, like. It would really help the channel grow. Same thing if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Drop us a 5-star review. Would really, really help the show grow. You can find us on Twitter. You can find the show's account right here if you're watching on YouTube. Description for anybody listening, audio only. You can find myself, Connor's handles. And yeah, without further ado, Con, let's just jump right into it. This has been something we've gotten into a lot over the last couple of years. We're in a couple dynasty baseball leagues, so we've been really in on prospects. But that's one of the things that you've been really diving into is the prospects around Major League Baseball. And these are the guys that typically get traded in these blockbuster deals that nobody really knows about. And then, 3-4 years later, they turn into some of the best players in the league. So I wanted to start off first with kind of like the top 10. We'll talk about some of the biggest prospects in the game and how they're going to impact the league this year. I think that's a good way to kind of get the casual fan involved with some of the bigger names. So I guess let's start off with the 2 top prospects, because these guys already debuted, and they're probably, or they are, the front runners for Rookie of the Year in their respective leagues, in Gunnar Henderson and Corbin Carroll. Gunnar Henderson is a third base shortstop for the Baltimore Orioles, and Corbin Carroll is an outfielder for the Diamondbacks. So let's start off with these guys, Connor. Obviously, like I said, favorites to win Rookie of the Year, but what about these guys do you think make them the number 1 and number 2 prospects in all of baseball?
Yeah, I like both of these guys. They're kind of similar in a few ways, not completely, but I think the most appealing thing about them is they probably kind of have this power speed blend, which is something you hear a lot in baseball, especially in fantasy circles. Everyone gets enamored with this idea of players who have this power and speed combo, because obviously with that can come high home run totals, high stolen base totals, and that's good for real life and for fantasy purposes. So both of them have a lot of power and a lot of speed. And then on top of that, they both have pretty good approaches at the plate. So another thing that especially I like to look at when I'm evaluating these prospects is guys who have just really, really good hit tools. Like, I just err on the side of a guy who has a really good plate discipline, knows how to draw walks, because at a young age, there's a lot of these prospects that have so much potential, but there's just so much swing and miss in their stuff. And Henderson and Carroll are 2 guys who have pretty refined approaches for their age, and I think that's a good reason why they're number 1 and number 2 right now too.
Yeah, I agree. I think they just have that knack. I think it's important that you talked about the hit tool. I think a lot of people, when it comes to baseball, hear about all these times, oh, they're 5-tool, they have all these tools, all that stuff. People I don't feel like not everybody, if you don't follow it as closely as, you might not know what that means. And obviously, being able to put the bat on the ball is one of the hardest things to do in all of professional sports. And those that can do it are the best in the bigs. And like you mentioned, a lot of these prospects come up, they have big time power. They can hit the ball a mile. They can run as fast as anybody. But, at the end of the day, if you can't, like they say in basketball, if you can't put the ball in the hole, doesn't matter what else you could do. If you can't put the bat on the ball, you can't really show off your power. So these guys, they do it in different ways. Corbin Carroll's 5'10", 165. They have some similar traits, but 5'10", 165. Gunnar Henderson's more prototypical 6'3", 220. So you got kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum physically, but both guys who can get it done, and they're going to contribute this year. If you're watching Diamondback games, if you're going to watch Oriole games, you're going to see these guys featured prominently in their lineups, and they're going to be future stars. Obviously, there's always prospects that miss. That's the nature of the business. But when you got guys like this, like you mentioned, that have the hit tool, that have the power, that have the speed, you've already seen a guy in Corbin Carroll separated his shoulder in the minor leagues. He's already bounced back and he's putting up great numbers in spring with the big league club. He already signed an 11-year or a 10-year extension worth over $100 million. So that should show you what the Diamondbacks think of a guy like Corbin Carroll. So I think it was important to start there just because you see that top end of the prospect realm, and you see, maybe what these teams are starting to invest in, getting on these guys early. So obviously 2 can't miss guys and should be big contributors this year. As we move down the top 10, a guy garnering a lot of buzz this spring training.
I know where you're going with this.
Was St. Louis Cardinals outfielder / third baseman Jordan Walker. Cardinals perennial NL Central favorite. I feel like for the last couple years, the Brewers are obviously really good in that division too, but the Cardinals have just been a storied franchise in the league. They got a lot of depth in the outfield, Con, but what is it about Jordan Walker that is so tantalizing, if you will?
I mean, the guy's 6'5", 220. He came into the minors kind of as one of those guys we were just talking about. Big power, lots of potential, weren't sure what the hit tool was like. And all he's done in the last 2 seasons is come in and hit over 300 in both his minor league seasons. He's 6'5", 220, like I said. He's 20 years old. So it's not like he's one of those guys who you got to talk about age to level. That's a big thing in the prospect world. Like if you see a 24-year-old dominating single A, you got to be a little wary of it. But
right, because the majority of the guys in that level are 18, 19, like you're saying. Right.
Exactly. So Jordan Walker, no issues with that. 20-year-old getting to the upper levels of the minors, hitting for average, hitting for power. I mean, he's pushing to break opening day with the team. So
as a 20-year-old,
great. He looked great. This is horrible. I was very early on Jordan Walker.
Yes, you were, Connor.
I picked Jordan Walker up in the Dynasty League when he was still
18 years old, maybe.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago, and I liked him. He was looking good, and I was like, yeah, he's still 18. He's still a couple years away, probably. There's some things that could happen. Dropped him for somebody else. I don't remember who. And Noah ended up scooping him up, stealing him from me. And now look at him, top 10 prospect in baseball. So,
and you know what? It was almost fitting, though, that he came to me because he was a Duke commit. And, we love to hear that. Ended up getting drafted in the first round. So can't hate on him for taking the $2.9 million and going to St. Louis. But yeah, a great athlete there. Another player who we expect to really contribute for the Cardinals this year. They're going to be on a lot of national television games. They're going to be in the hunt come September. So you're going to hear about Jordan Walker down the stretch. Let's talk about the Yankees real quick, because they have a young shortstop who could potentially break camp with the team, if not come out pretty early thereafter. Obviously the Yankees, one of the biggest, names in all of sports. And ever since Derek Jeter retired, they've been struggling to kind of fill that void at the shortstop position. But now they have a top 5 prospect in the name of Anthony Volpe, 21-year-old shortstop. Do you think this guy, obviously, I mean, let's just call it what it is. Jeter was overrated. But can he be the next Jeter at the shortstop position? That's just a shameless Phillies fan taking a shot there. But
yeah, no.
What do you think about Volpe?
I like Volpe. To put it into context, last year, he was the first minor leaguer. He had 20 home runs and he had 50 steals in the minor leagues. First minor leaguer to do that since Andrew Jones in 1995. So that's some pretty good company right there. Obviously, he's got some speed. He's got some power, especially in that stadium, Yankee Stadium. He could definitely see 20 plus homers there. I like Volpe. He's got a pretty good hit tool. He's a little bit inconsistent. He's had some slumps throughout the last 2 years, but a lot more good than bad with Volpe. And I do like him. I think he very well could be the shortstop of the future for the Yankees. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he could be too, and especially when you're talking about a big team like that, it's always it's always important to kind of keep the pipeline going and see if they can get a big position nailed right with their prospects there. So as we kind of move through the rest of the top 10, there's a couple other interesting names here. Obviously, the number 6 overall prospect here, Andrew Painter of the Philadelphia Phillies, is shut down currently, dealing with some injuries. So we won't talk about him too much. We'll talk about him a little bit more. We're definitely gonna be talking about him more as the season goes on. So we won't talk about him too much. But let's talk about the Orioles in general real quick, because they have a couple prospects up here near the top 10. Let's talk about their system as a whole, because they obviously have Gunnar Henderson, number 1 prospect in all of baseball. And then when we talk about the rest of the top 100, you got a guy at number 7, you got a guy at number 12. So you got 3 guys in the top 12, and then we can kind of go in their system. But they got the number 2 pitching prospect in Grayson Rodriguez, who is expected to break camp with the team this year. And then you got number 1 overall pick Jackson Holliday, son of former ball player Matt Holliday. And you got those guys all in the top 12. So let's talk about the O's real quick, and just where their system is at, where it goes this year and beyond, and what we kind of see them, going forward the next couple years.
Yeah, I love the Orioles' direction where they're headed right now. I mean, you talk about Grayson Rodriguez, like you said, the number 7 prospect. Going to start the year, it looks like. He battled some injuries last year, but this is a guy who's pretty much been dominant throughout his entire minor league career. He's struck out batters at a rate of 13 per 9 innings in his minor league career, and he's held opponents to a 173 career batting average. I mean, those are just nasty numbers. He's 6'5". He's got a really projectable frame, good 4-pitch mix, good control. Yeah, I mean, everything looks good for Rodriguez as long as health permits. He should be I would think his potential is a 1 or 2 starter in the league.
Definitely front line
if it all clicks for him. Moving down to the number 12 guy, Jackson Holliday, who you mentioned, just got drafted, son of Matt Holliday, former MLB player. 19-year-old. Hit tool looks good. I mean, He got a little taste of the minors last year, I believe, after he got drafted. Yep. Hit 297 with a 489 OBP. So you want to talk about plate discipline at a young age. Obviously, he's got the pedigree. He's got some speed, 25 walks to 12 strikeouts. Obviously, that's a limited sample size, but the guy drew 25 walks in 20 games. So
pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. He's one of those guys who, with that hit tool, the speed and the power projection, he looks like he could be close to a sure bet as well. So you talk about Henderson, Rodriguez, and Holliday, Holliday's still a couple years away, obviously, but
right, but you're talking about a guy who's still with the big league camp. He was invited to spring training. He's not on the 40-man roster, but it's by just spring training. A lot of players have been sent back to the minor league spring training camp, but he is still there at 19 years old. So
I would not be surprised if he debuts next year. Yeah.
Yeah, which is very possible.
Yeah.
And going off this let's not forget about former number 1 overall prospect, Adley Rutschman, their catcher they have now, who's 25 years old, was a first-round draft pick, debuted last year, so he's no longer eligible to be a prospect technically, but of probably their face of their franchise in Adley Rutschman. So you're talking about a couple guys coming up in Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson. You're talking about guys down the road in Jackson Holliday, a couple other guys down the list a little bit, Colton Cowser, Jordan Westberg, Heston Kierstead, just like a couple other guys down the road. They got some guys coming in, and then you got a guy in Grayson Rodriguez who could potentially be a front of the line starter. There's a lot to like. The Orioles have been struggling, ever since their last playoff berth in 2014, when Manny Machado was, breaking into the league.
That was a fun time.
Right. You almost forget about. I think they haven't been in the playoffs for such a long time, and then you think about it, and you're like, wow, it wasn't that long ago. but you're starting to, see the semblance of their team come together. So with having so many prospects in, near the top 10, I kind of wanted to take an aside and talk about the O's for a few minutes there.
I
But
do want to. I
yeah, go
do
ahead, go
think
ahead.
Colton Cowser is another one to watch. I think he makes his debut this year. He's a guy they took a little bit higher. He was the number one hitter in the class coming out 2 years ago. And they took him with the number 5 pick, Sam Houston State, small school. But this guy's just hit. He worked his way. He started the year in high A last year. He finished in triple A. Absolutely tore up double A, hit 341 with a 469 OBP in double A. He's got some power, hit 10 homers in double A while he was there. He's a guy who he'll start the year in the minors, but I would not be surprised to see him in the outfield come July this summer.
Yeah, a lot of their guys up here are projected to debut this year in 2023, and almost 6 or 7 of their top 10 are projected to debut this year. A lot of position players. They still have Team USA representative Cedric Mullen leading off for their team in center field. So just another great, and they're just starting to slowly build. Ryan Mountcastle, first baseman for the team, only 26-year-old, coming off a 30 home run season 2 years ago. Didn't have as great of a power year last year, but someone who's still projected for over 28 home runs this year. They're just slowly building. Another guy, Kyle Stowers, 25 years old. Like, they just got a lot of guys, 25, 26, 24, like Gunnar Henderson's only 21 years old, and he's going to be, a starter for them. So I think that's really important to talk about them specifically in this prospect range, because they got so many guys coming up. As we kind of move down here in the top 10, I feel like we have to talk about this guy, Elly De La Cruz. This is the guy who many people think is going to be the next number 1 prospect in the game of baseball. With how it works, Con, correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe you need 50 at-bats in the big leagues, or is that 50 innings for pitchers to lose your prospect eligibility? If you could let me get a quick fact check on that. Yep. I believe it's like 50 at-bats or 50 innings pitched is what you get to lose your prospect eligibility. So I say that to say Gunnar Henderson, Corbin, Carroll, Jordan Walker, number 3 prospect Francisco Alvarez, who's a catcher for the Mets. All 4 of those guys, Anthony Volpe potentially, who's the 5th prospect. All 5 of those guys are more than likely going to graduate within the next couple of years, or excuse me, within the first month or 2, right?
So it's 130 at-bats or 50 innings pitched.
130 at-bats, right. So more than likely those top 5 guys are going to accrue 130 at-bats this year, including what they already have had last year. So you're talking about the top 5 prospects in the game of baseball, more than likely graduating within the first couple months of the year. So talk to me about Elly De La Cruz, Con, because obviously we're really engulfed in fantasy. A lot of people love this guy, but from a baseball sense, this is a guy who legit could be the next face of the franchise for the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah. You want to talk about tools. This guy has tools. 6'5", 200, another guy who's only 21 years old. He's one who the swing and miss is still there. Yep. So if it wasn't, he would already be the number 1 prospect in baseball. Yeah. He's a guy who hit 28 homers across 2 levels last year. And he also stole 47 bags. That's just at 6'5", 200, you're doing that. That's just now the scary part is he struck out 158 times. All right. So that's the one thing that I'm really, really interested to see.
In about 117 games. So
exactly. So how does Elly address that this year? Regardless, he's going to be exciting. I mean, the Reds need it. They need an influx of talent. Yeah, I'm really excited to watch him. I think it's very fair, more than fair to say that he could be the new number 1 this year once those guys graduate. But a lot of it is going to depend on if he can improve some of those strikeouts.
Yeah, and he's gonna be that guy regardless of if he improves on that. I think there's a really, really good chance he, is that next guy who's going to be the new number 1 overall prospect in all of baseball. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see. As we kind of scan outside the top 10 here, Con, let's talk about one other name who could potentially be the top prospect in all of baseball. I might be going out a little bit of left field here. I don't know if you're going to think James Wood. This guy, 20 years old, in last year, he was across 3 levels.
Yep.
In his time. He got traded from the San Diego Padres to the Washington Nationals in the monster Juan Soto trade. And it was almost kind of like a throw-in. You're talking about Mackenzie Gore was a headline. You're talking about CJ Abrams, former top 10 prospect. You're talking about Robert Hassel, former top 20 prospect. And then they're like, okay, yeah, we'll throw James Wood in, this kid in rookie ball. And this guy, you talk about Elly De La Cruz, this guy is 6'7", 240, and doesn't have any holes in his swing. So when you talk about that combination, you talk about a guy who is getting graded as a 60 run, which they grade from 20 to 80, and 60 is above average plus, I think that's what they call it. So talking about a guy who's got 60 power, 60 run, like he's got every single tool you could want. And unlike a guy like Elly De La Cruz, doesn't have those holes in his swing. So do you think that there's a chance James could jump Elly and be the number 1 prospect, or do you think it's going to take him, a little bit of time to build that up?
I do. I see it's funny because I'd rather have James Wood in a dynasty league. Like Elly De La Cruz could very well be.
Why is that?
Because for the reason you just said, I love the hit tool, and I'm probably a little bit too enamored with the hit tool because then I may not ever have guys who have those ceilings, but he kind of does have that ceiling too. Like there's certain guys who have it all, who have the hit tool and the ceiling, kind of like a Corbin Carroll or even a Gunnar Henderson. But I think James Wood is one of those guys too. So it's like, yeah, Elly's a little bit more toolsy than him, but is he that much more? Like you talked about it, I mean, he's a guy who stole 20 bags last year. Obviously, in the low levels of the minors, it's a lot easier for them. They have some rules about picking off. You can only pick off a certain number of times. But like you said, he's graded a 60 speed, so he stole 20 bags and he's hitting for some power too. I mean, he hit 12 home runs last year. The power is definitely there. So I like James Wood a lot, and I don't think it's far-fetched to say he could jump him or even become the number 1 prospect either. I've seen people suggest that as well.
Yeah. So I think those are 2 really, really big names. I think they're going to kind of be a part of that next wave, and how they go from there. As we kind of move on, Con, let's talk about some other guys here. Is there any guy toward the top here that is kind of catching your eye, or you wanted to talk about specifically as we kind of move through these ranks, whether it be a pitcher or a hitter that I jumped over?
No, I'm kind of scrolling a little bit further down the list right now. I'm kind of trying to see some guys who could contribute in the big leagues this year, maybe.
Yeah. So let me go down the top 100. I'll just throw some names out to you real quick, just because I'm going to see some guys here. I mean, just as I'm going down here, Tristan Casas of the Boston Red Sox, Ezequiel Tovar of the Colorado Rockies, Josh Young of the Texas Rangers, Miguel Vargas of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Hunter Brown of the Houston Astros. There's a lot of guys here that could potentially debut this year and really have a big impact. Cade Cavalli, Washington Nationals pitcher. Where do you kind of want to go next here?
Let's talk about Tovar a little bit.
Okay.
Number 25. Tovar. Yeah, number 25 ranked prospect in all of baseball for the Rockies. Obviously, the Rockies have been the bottom, the dungeon, the barrel of the league for the last however long. But whenever you get a guy who's got a lot of tools playing in Coors Field every day, that's always fun, especially from a fantasy perspective. So this is a guy who last year in AAA, he hit 333, small sample size, but he also hit 318 in AA in a bigger sample size. He's got a lot of power speed. He had 17 steals, 13 homers in AA. And then he even got a cup of coffee, as Noah likes to say, in the bigs last year. Struggled a little bit, but only played 9 games. So you can take that for what it's worth. He's probably going to start the year as the shortstop in Colorado. I'm interested to see how he looks. I think he's only 21. The Rockies are weird. I mean, I think if they called him up last year, he's gonna start the year with them this year. But
They've had some
what do you think of
injuries
Tovar?
too.
You like Tovar? What do you think?
Yeah, I like Tovar, and especially when we're talking about fantasy, I love guys that field their position. I love guys who you don't have to worry about them in the field of play when they're defending their position. And when I talk about that 20 to 80 grade speed, when you talk about 80 on the high end, that is like elite level stuff. That is like Mike Trout level power. That is like, when you get an 80 grade on your hit tool, your power tool, your run, your arm, or your fielding, that is legit. Like Corbin Carroll, I think, has an 80 grade on his run. So he's the fastest player in baseball. So that should give
he
you
clocked the fastest time last year.
Yeah. Yep. So when we talk about Ezequiel Tovar, this is a guy who has a 70 grade field and a 60 grade arm. So from the rip, he's going to be a legit presence at the shortstop position. And then you talk about his bat, a guy who's given, 55 hits, so above average hit tool, a little bit below average power with 45. But like you mentioned with Coors Field at the altitude in Denver, the power will play up a little bit. So I think that this is, I always say this, like we talk about a guy like Ramon Laureano, just a random guy, but was always great in the field. And those are the guys and you saw this with the Phillies. They take a chance on a guy like Brandon Marsh, a guy who's got tools, has shown potential in the batter's box, but is an everyday player in the field. And I think those are the types of guys you can bet on at the major league level because they're everyday players. You don't have to worry about, do I have to move them to second base? Do I have to protect them on the field? No, every single day they're going to go out there, field their position at a high level. And then when they start to make gains in the batter's box, then you start to see a real player emerge. So I think that is kind of the upside, painted wise, how I'm kind of painting it for Tovar. And then, if he doesn't pan out in the box, he'll still be a decent bench player, a good regular. So I think it's kind of a win-win for the Rockies in that sense. And then I kind of skipped over one guy here, Brett Baty of the New York Mets, a guy who already debuted, but could more than likely take the starting third base job for the New York Mets. I kind of skipped over him, but he's going to be a big contributor this year for the Mets. Do you think he is going to kind of be their next guy, their next Pete Alonso, their next guy along the lines, their next Francisco Alvarez, and be the next superstar for the Mets?
I think he's pretty solid. I honestly haven't watched much of him, but you're talking about a guy who gets a 60 grade hit and a 60 grade power. 6'3", 210. He's definitely got some pop at the plate, and he's got a little bit of strikeout stuff, but not too much. I mean, the guy tore up the minors last year, double and triple A, combined at the two levels, hit 315 with a 410 OBP. He's getting on base. He hit 19 homers. Struggled last year when he got called up, but in that lineup, it's a good spot for him to excel. He's going to be batting around guys like you said, Lindor, Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, Nimmo, just a good line, Marte. So he's going to be in a good spot to come in and succeed right away, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he and especially after the Carlos Correa deal fell through for the Mets, it pretty much just sets him right up to step right in there and really shine. Unfortunately for Phillies fans, he's looking like he's going to be there and really step up there. So as we kind of, I guess, get to draw towards a close here, Con, let's talk about, I guess let's specifically talk about maybe one of the best, some of the best systems in the league. I don't know if you have, numbers of top 100 prospects or just general study that you've done. Who are some of the teams that do the best with their minor leagues? Just off the top of my head, just to kind of get you primed, like obviously Cleveland does very, very well with pitching prospects. Just real quick, as we kind of wrap up the show, talk a little bit about that and some specific teams that utilize the minors really, really well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you hit Cleveland already. They're known for their elite pitching, and they develop their pitching really, really well. We talked about the Orioles, I think, and I saw a poll that front offices voted on it, and the Orioles overwhelmingly were voted as the best minor league system. So I think they definitely have a ton of talent. You got to mention the Rays. The Rays kind of just find guys out of nowhere. They always seem to get the most out of their pitchers, and they've even produced some hitting prospects too. We'll see how Wander Franco does. I'm excited to see how he looks as he gets older. But the Rays definitely look good. Guy to look out for them. Couple guys, Taj Bradley, a pitcher. I know Noah is very familiar with him. He could definitely debut at some point this year. 21-year-old right-hander, had a 2.57 ERA across two levels last year in the minors. So he looks good as a starter. And then another guy, Curtis Mead, who's kind of jumped up out of nowhere. Not really sure what position he plays. Kind of typical Rays utility guy. But he just hits the ball. Really, really good hit tool. He's got some power. And yeah, those two guys you could look out for too.
Yeah, side note on Mead. I don't know if you knew this or not, but former Phil.
Oh, I knew that.
He was traded for Christopher Sanchez, and he's now the 33rd prospect in all of baseball for Tampa Bay. So good job, Clentak.
Of course, yeah. Another team, the Dodgers. The Dodgers are always producing talent,
which is counterintuitive. A lot of people think they just spend a lot of money and will buy their team, but they have a great farm system to kind of back that up as well.
Yeah, they do a lot of wheeling and dealing. They'll trade for prospects. They'll do a lot, but they got some good guys in their system right now. Miguel Vargas, probably the one I would say could make the biggest impact this year. Should start the year as a full-time everyday player, especially with the injury to Gavin Lux. Hate to see that. But I like Vargas a lot. 23-year-old. He's hit over 300 in every year he's been in the minors. 3 years in a row, he's hit over 300. He's got power and he's got versatility to play multiple positions in the field. So Vargas is a guy I'd definitely be looking for. Outside of that, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of other teams who have some solid farm systems.
Yeah, I mean the Nationals now kind of boosted theirs up a little bit with the trade to Juan Soto. With the trade of Juan Soto, they kind of boosted their farm system up a little bit. But
the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks, Carroll just graduated. Obviously, he's number 2 prospect in baseball. They had another guy graduate last year, Alec Thomas, who looked really good. He was a top 100 prospect the year before. Jordan Lawler is their number 2 prospect, who was their first-round draft pick 2 years ago. 20 years old, prep shortstop, got to Double-A. He's probably going to debut next year, 2024 at some point. If it all clicks for him, he's an all-star level player. And then you talk about Drew Jones, who they took in the first round this year.
Was he the number 1 pick last year? I said Jackson Holiday was the number 1 pick, but I think Drew Jones
was 2.
Drew Jones was number 2. Okay. Yes. All right. So I was right, but still they were 1A and 1B.
He unfortunately got hurt.
Yes.
So he's going to be out for a little bit, but if it all clicks for him, he's another all-star level player. And then another guy who no one knows, I love this guy, pitcher, Brandon Pfaadt. I always say his name wrong. Pfaadt. Yeah. I've heard both.
Okay.
Regardless, love the guy. Threw a ton of innings, had over 200 strikeouts in the minors last year. He should start the season as the 5th starter. He probably isn't going to, but he's probably the second best pitcher in their organization behind Zach Gallen. So really, really like this Diamondbacks outlook for a couple of years. Hopefully they can play their cards right. There's even some guys a little bit lower who have some potential too. So I like where the Diamondbacks are headed.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good overview. What we kind of wanted to do with this episode was kind of just talk about some big name prospects that could debut this year, and then obviously talk about some more systems. We could talk all day about prospects. There's just so many players in the minor leagues, but I think specifically related to our MLB preview, it was important for us to at least lay the groundwork a little bit for the prospects that could debut this year and make a lot of noise. We're going to change it up a little bit this year. Instead of doing just 2 leagues and 2 episodes, we're going to do 6 episodes to span the 6 divisions in the MLB. So you can look out for that. The end of this week into next week, we're going to have coverage all the time. Then we're also going to have an episode later about the futures market for our betting fans, about awards, divisions, over-unders for win totals. So we're going to have a lot of coverage as we build up to the MLB season. So you can definitely check that out when it comes out. But that is going to wrap it up for this one. Once again, check the description below for all our social media handles, myself and Connor's. Feel free to shoot us any questions. We'll get to it as soon as we can on the show. And yeah, that's going to be a wrap for this one, Connor. As always, thanks for hopping on. Much appreciated. And we'll get you back on soon. And yeah, once again, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you back here again next time.